Hey, have you heard any good books lately? This is Talking Audiobooks, your weekly podcast for all news, discussion, and opinions surrounding the wonderful world of audiobooks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are, whenever you may be listening. This is the Talking Audiobooks podcast, season number 2, episode number 4. I am your host, the man with a face made for radio and the voice made for print, Casey Trowbridge, and I am so happy to be with you. We have got a lot to talk about on Talking Audiobooks this week. In just a few minutes, producer Ken will be joining me for a news segment. We're going to run down some of the stories that we've come across in the world of audiobooks over the past week. The biggest of which will be the news on the sales for 2016. How did audiobooks sell last year? Well, the short version is they were up again. And Ken and I will be breaking down all that information in just a few moments. I have a What Caught My Ear segment this week. Our fan feedback question is tied into the news that Ken and I will discuss. It is called Missing in Audio, and it's books that we would like to see made into audiobooks that haven't yet, and that's going to be tied into the news, as I said, and you'll hear how that is related in just a few minutes. I'll have an audio bingo update, as well as we'll play again the promo telling you how to play audio bingo in case you're still undecided on how to play or whether or not to play. Or maybe you're listening to this show for the first time and you want to get in on it. The month is half over, and that seems hard to believe, but this month has flown by for me. Recording this podcast has been a tremendous help in that. It's been fun. I'm enjoying myself. I hope you're enjoying listening. So we'll have that and whatever else happens to come up between now and the time I finish recording the show. As I said, Ken will be here in a few minutes. We'll be talking about the news. I keep banning him from the show and he keeps coming back, but we got to just keep trying, but you just keep getting rid of him until he gets the hint and doesn't come back. No, actually, I wanted to have him on. I thought it would be fun to banter with him for a few minutes, and we could go over some of the sales data that was released by the Audio Publishers Association last week, and it will be good to have him on in a role other than reading the commercials that you skip over to get to more of me talking, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I guess since it is the body of the show, that's what people are expected to do, skip the commercials and get to the good stuff. Well, we hope it's all good, or it's all enjoyable, or thought-provoking. Want to mention a few things. Number one, I want to encourage you to go back to audiobooks.com/audiobookmonth to get in on all their giveaways and free book downloads and bargains for this month as they celebrate June as Audiobook Month. That, of course, runs through the entire month of June, which is now half over, so you still got time to enter into some contests and get some free books from them. Of course, audiobooksync.com, that's audiobooksync.com. You can go up there now and get your 2 free titles for this week. You'll need the Overdrive Media Console app, which is available for many platforms, including Mac, PC, iOS, and Android. You can check that every Thursday, and you will see 2 new titles through the rest of the summer. It's a great program. It's designed to keep teens reading through the summer months, and who knows, at the end of the sync season, you may just end up with a treat from AudioFile magazine. If the last few years have held any kind of precedent, and if that precedent continues, you can expect a treat from them for participating in this year's sync program as well. You can get in touch with us on the show, feedback at talkingaudiobooks.com. want to remind you again, we are giving away 6 free book credits from Audible.com. And they can be used on any book that Audible has in its content library. Whoever wins this contest will be sent an email, and that email will contain some promo codes, and you can go up to the Audible website and redeem them. And you can spend them on absolutely any book that you want to. And all you have to do to enter this month is email us at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com between now and the end of June 30th. And it could be emailing us suggestions for future show, suggestions for possible interview. It could be an answer to one of our fan feedback questions from either this week or the previous weeks. There's a lot of latitude. Just email the show and give us some information, and you'll be entered in, and you could win as many as 6 free books from Audible.com. And who doesn't like free books? If you like listening to this podcast, I have to assume that you would like free books. And with that having all been said, Ken will be joining us here in just a moment to get to the news items. Before we do that, I will play a couple of promos for you from Audible so you can get a free trial and maybe get yet another free book from them just by listening to this podcast. And then we will play the ChristianAudio.com sales alert, as that sale is going on for another week. And so we want to give you a chance to take advantage of that if you wish. So after these words from Audible and Christian Audio, Ken and I will be back with this week's news.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/talkingaudiobooks. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
This is Casey Trowbridge with a Talking Audiobooks podcast sale alert. Folks over at ChristianAudio.com, that's Christian Audio, all one word, .com, have unveiled their twice yearly sale. Nearly every book in their catalog is on sale for just $7.49 or less. That's right, I said nearly every book in their catalog. ChristianAudio.com specializes in inspirational faith-based fiction and nonfiction titles. While the site does offer several membership plans, this sale is available to everyone regardless of current membership status. ChristianAudio.com's $7.49 sale runs from now through June 23rd, so make your list and stock up. ChristianAudio.com also offers a free audiobook download each month. You can access this title at ChristianAudio.com/free. All they ask is that you sign up for their newsletter, which makes you aware of new releases and sales alerts like this one. So check out the sale at ChristianAudio.com and check out the free audiobook download at ChristianAudio.com/free, and happy shopping. All right, and we're back, and I have to say that my plan to ban him from the show has been poor thus far, because you hear him every week as the disclaimer, and you hear him in the commercials, but usually people fast forward through those, so you don't have to hear him. But now he's back for the news. We have producer Ken with us, but today he's known as News Hound Ken. Ken, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Casey. I should have brought my Sherlock Holmes hat if I'm a news hound. How you doing?
Super sleuth, man. I'm good. It's great to have you back on the show. I mean, like I said, the lifetime ban has gone poorly thus far. It's less effective than Donald Trump's travel ban has been, I think.
Oh, it's a whole other podcast.
We haven't been taken to court over your banning anyway.
Not yet. Good. I'm going to be around for a while, I think.
Yeah, I think I better let you out at least once a month or so. But we're actually here because we have some audiobook news to discuss. And I thought, well, people get to hear me talk by myself all the time on this show. And I thought it'd be fun to have you back, but playing the role of sort of reader and interview subject instead of host.
Uh-oh.
I mean, that was
scary.
a debacle, so we thought we'd maybe try it a different way. But he pays me to make fun of him, people. That's the thing. So, Ken, you know who's got enough money is the audiobook industry.
Well, they certainly raked in more of it in 2016, which is good for us.
It is a good thing for us, but some sales data came out last week, I guess it would be, and we have some statistics that we thought maybe the audience might be interested in knowing. So, Ken, why don't you tell us how audiobooks did in 2016?
Well, Casey, there's a new report issued by the Audio Publishers Association that found that 2016 was a great year for audiobooks. In fact, their findings show double-digit growth for both audiobook sales and title output. So sales rose a little over 18% over 2015 for total sales of about $2.1 billion. That, to me, is an astounding figure. And unit sales did better. Unit sales, the number of actual audiobooks sold, rose almost 34% to 89.5 million. So 89.5 million audiobooks were sold last year. That still just boggles my mind. Those figures are based just on the top 20 audiobook publishers. So what Audio Publishers Association does is they extrapolate out for the entire industry based on those figures so they can give an estimate for the entire market.
Well, I contributed about $1,600 worth of sales last year, so I can believe it.
So the entire number of audiobooks published in 2016 was up 43% over 2015. Of course, it's not anywhere near the printed book market, but that's a lot of audiobooks.
It is. The thing about that is, as the sales increase and as the output of titles increase, the publishers are going to be spending a lot of time and resources and hunting through their back catalog for things that haven't been released yet. And the rest of this show, or I should say the other big segment of this show coming up later, is where I talk about books that are missing in audio. They're not out as audible audiobooks yet, or any other kind of audiobook for that matter. And I run through a list of books that I would love to hear on audio that haven't been released to the commercial market yet. And I think the fact that these sales have been going up for so many years in a row and the title output only seems to grow larger and larger, I think a lot of publishers are going to be looking through their back catalogs to see what they can come up with, or they're going to get their acquisition teams to work to see what else is out there that they might be able to acquire for publication.
Well, not too surprisingly, the sales increase has been driven by digital downloads. And get this, digital downloads accounted for 82.4% of sales in 2015. So the vast majority of us are getting our audiobooks. We're downloading them from iTunes, from Audible, from whoever sells audiobooks, and we're finally starting to listen to them on our smartphones. And audiobooks are no longer the redheaded stepchild of the publishing business like it used to be. So by and large, Casey, I think what that means is we've pretty much ditched the CD as the delivery method for our digital content, and we've finally begun to embrace the digital download process. And finally, using our smartphones, people used to think smartphones were going to ignite the ebook industry, but it didn't. But what it has done is ignited the audiobook industry. And the CD, for audiobooks anyway, is about to go the way of cassette tapes.
And I would say that as it relates to the CD, one thing even though the sales of CDs and physical media is continuing to drop, it's probably not going anywhere anytime soon, just for the fact that now publishers now they don't have to print them in such a big volume anymore. It's almost something that they can do on demand as they need a title. They don't have to worry about having a warehouse full of CDs that they're not going to sell. They can sort of print them up as they need them.
Well, we'll see. Time will tell, huh? People said that about the cassette tape too, and when was the last time you listened to one of those? All right. Another part of the study done by Edison Research found that 24% of Americans listened to at least one audiobook in 2016, which was up 22% over the previous year. So more of us are starting to accept this as a form of entertainment and using our smartphones to do it. And it says that most listeners read or listened to an average of 15 books in the last year. So that means you are in any way average.
No, I listened to 20 books in January this year. So I like to be above average in something.
Well, the audiobook world needs more people like you, Casey, and people like you to tell people that you can listen to audiobooks anywhere, anytime, and you can enjoy it as much as you do just reading a print book.
Yes, and studies would show otherwise, that you can comprehend as much from an audiobook as you can from physically moving your eyes across a page and turning it, or swiping your fingers across to turn the page, or whatever you have to do.
Well, it seems like the stigma of listening to audiobooks.
Yeah, there's always been like I don't know what you would have called it, the subculture of people that listen to audiobooks. It was like for people that had long commutes, and it was considered a very specialized market, at least by the general population, maybe not the industry itself, but I would say the general population always thought of audiobooks in a different way than they're starting to think about them now. And it's one of those things, like digital downloads are so perfect. You buy something and you press a button and you can start listening to it instantaneously. You don't have to wait for anything to show up in the mail, and you don't have to worry about a scratch CD, or it meets everybody's needs. And now with, like you said, you can fit a bunch of them on your phone at once if you want to switch between titles. And we talked about the link several times, and that's one reason why this podcast exists in the first place, is the fact that there is a mounting belief, which I have believed myself for a while, that podcasts are also a gateway to audiobooks, and the podcast industry is booming as well. And to me, that's no coincidence that both of these industries seem to be thriving at the same time.
I totally agree. I think one equally benefits the other.
So I think what we can say is sales have been increasing for a few years consistently, and I don't even know that they've peaked.
Oh, I don't think it's peaked. In fact, I think as far as the industry goes, it's in its infancy, and I think it's got a long, long way to go before it reaches critical mass.
So, Ken, may I ask you a question?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
What did you do with your share of the $2.1 billion?
I bought a latte at Starbucks.
I knew you were going to say that, and I was hoping you were going to say that. But that costs like $600 million. So, I mean, that's a pretty good...
Yeah, that's what lattes are going for
healthy
these
amount
days.
of cash you took in there for a cup of coffee.
All right, let me ask you a question.
All right, ask me a question.
What do you think the most popular genre was in audiobooks last year?
Well, since I read the article, I'm going to say that the most popular genres are mysteries and science fiction.
And romance.
Romance.
Now, the study doesn't say which of those genres was the most popular, but my guess would be romance, because this may be sexist, but aren't the predominantly listeners of audiobooks women? Is that sexist?
Oh.
Well, maybe it is. Sorry.
You know what? It would be interesting, and maybe one day we'll do our own sort of small, hardly representative sample size of the overall listening audience, but maybe we'll do our own demographic survey and find out, because they don't break that down by men and women.
Well, they didn't in this study, at least, so I wish they would drill down into that. I'd like to know. Maybe I should take my microphone down onto the Hollywood Boulevard and ask people, men and women, what you like to listen to.
It's not good. It wouldn't even be the weirdest thing that happened on Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, no, there are a lot weirder things for sure, but at least maybe I could ask some people on the street before someone comes along to kill me and steal my microphone. Ask women if they listen to audiobooks, ask the guys if they listen to audiobooks. I think it'd be very interesting. It would tell us quite a bit about the culture and who's listening to what and why, and, we'll do our own publishing, our own study.
Well, what I would say is that most of the audiobook bloggers that I know are female.
Wonder why that is.
So if that tells you anything, and I'm not sure it tells me anything, but your hardest core fans are probably women. But to be fair, they probably listen to as many mysteries as they do romance novels. So,
well, I'd like to know what the most popular genre is in audiobooks. They didn't say anything about that.
No, I would say that I would probably bet on mysteries and thrillers being the number one category, if only because of the fact that there are so many big name mystery and thriller authors that seem to sell a lot of books in general and audiobooks. Stephen King's and James Patterson and David Baldacci, and on goes the list. And so I would probably tend to bet on that. And of course, it's not really a big surprise to me, because it seems like anytime they talk about the fact that sales are going up, or anytime they talk to a retailer about what's selling, we all have always known that fiction outsells nonfiction.
Well, then the self-help titles must be really selling well if fiction outsells them. I guess we all need help.
Well, I've looked at the bestseller lists several times, and Audible releases their bestseller list every week through the Associated Press. And like some of the nonfiction titles have been on the list forever, like The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
I'm up to habit number 5.
That book came out forever ago, but it occasionally it finds its way back into the top 10 best-selling nonfiction titles, whereas the
keep circling back.
Fiction seems to be more fluid and changes regularly. But the nonfiction, it seems like if you can get a book into that list, it might be there for a while.
Well, I do think they serve a purpose and provide a lot of useful information for people that may not have access to that information.
Well, that's why I don't listen to a lot of self-help audiobooks, because I know I need more help than they can give me. There's not a book called How to Be a Better Podcast Host, is there? Because
I'm sure
there is. Maybe I should spend an Audible credit on it.
Maybe not an audiobook, but a print book, Podcasting 101. Maybe I can go find one on how to be a good podcast producer. But I think maybe you should write the book on how to be a good podcast host, because I think you are.
Well, I appreciate that. Maybe, Ken, that book will be able to help us with our next subject.
Which is?
How do you feel about hearing your own voice when it is recorded?
Terrible.
Because Audible Range, which is the sort of the magazine side of audible.com, they have a little blog, or, I guess you'd call it like a magazine, but they do a lot of feature articles and things, and I don't think they put it out as an audio version for some reason, but maybe they should.
Well, that'd be a good idea.
Since they sell audiobooks and stuff. But they had an article recently, and it basically asked the question, if you're a professional, are you able to stand hearing your own voice? And Ken, why don't you give us the actual title of that article instead of the thing I just made up, which isn't nearly as good.
Well, it's called, Can You Still Hate the Sound of Your Voice When It's Your Profession?
We were talking off air about this, and I thought when I saw this article, a friend of mine posted it on Facebook. Somehow I missed Audible sharing it and had to get it from a friend, but Thanks to Katie for posting it on Facebook. I thought this would be a good article to talk about because this is something that plagues me. Like, you send me the show every once in a while, and like, I want you to listen to this so that I can get it uploaded and let me know what you think of it. And make me listen to my voice, and I'll think he's not paying me enough for me to have to listen to my voice.
Paying you too much.
And I'm not sure there is such thing as enough to get me to listen to my own voice. So for me, listening to my own voice has always been a tough thing to swallow, because when I hear my own voice as a recording, I always think it sounds like I just woke up.
Well, isn't that kind of your perpetual state? You're always having just woken up?
Well, I guess, because I don't drink coffee. I can't afford Starbucks.
Well, listen, when we first talked, before we did the interview 5 months ago, the minute we talked, I really realized I really liked your voice. I thought it was very authentic, it was very friendly. It was, you have a very folksy quality to your voice, and I thought, man, you should be doing the podcast, or you should be doing a podcast, because your voice is friendly and easy to listen to, not to mention the fact that you're super knowledgeable about audiobooks, and I think that's important. And that's probably one of the things that we don't like when we hear our own voice, is that it doesn't sound authentic to us, because our voice normally goes through our head and our ears and the bones in our head, and it's not what we're expecting to hear, because it doesn't sound like my voice would sound to you, because you're hearing it as it comes over the what's the word for it? The sound waves, and it comes to your ear directly. For us, we hear our own voice filtered on our head, and it doesn't sound at all like we think it should.
But it's nice to know we're not the only ones that have these sorts of problems, because the article mentions and has quotes from people in different voice professions, including audiobook narrators, that have discussed listening to their own voice, and how, if they had to get used to it, how they managed to get used to it.
Right.
I think you had a quote that you wanted to pull, or a paragraph, or an excerpt to share with the world.
Well, there was a part of a study that was done where they played 18 voices to a room of 80 people and asked them to evaluate the voices, and the people did, and what they didn't know is that 3 of the voices in what they had been listening to were their own voice, and the majority of people didn't even recognize their own voice. And that goes back to what I was saying about how different our voice sounds to us in our head, as opposed to how people actually hear it and perceive what we sound like. So I don't know. I would certainly know. I'm positive I would know my voice in a group of voices played back to me. I can't imagine not knowing that. You?
Well, and to be fair, we both have you more than I, but we both have a long history of hearing our own voices, so we would pick them out instantly.
For better or worse.
If you're not used to being recorded, I suppose it might be harder, but my problem with that would be, people take videos all the time for Facebook and YouTube and everything, and they talk in them. So how would they not have heard their own voices by this point?
I don't know.
How can people not recognize their own voice? You can disbelieve that it's yours, but it would seem to me like you would have heard it already.
Well, maybe it goes back to that perception of our own perception of our voice, and we don't sound. Maybe we should just all, speak in the shower, because when you sing in the shower, you sound a whole lot better. And maybe just speaking in the shower would help you get more used to your own voice, and you'd be a little less paranoid about how other people hear it. Although other people hear your voice all the time, and they don't run out of the room whenever you talk, normally. And I would think that you would be able to relax at the fact that people accept your voice as they hear it and as you are, and they like you anyway.
In my head, I sound like James Earl Jones. Not really, but...
I wonder what James Earl Jones sounds like in the shower.
Probably awesome. But
I mean, he's Darth Vader and the voice of CNN, for crying out loud.
I would hope, I would hope that he is not one who dislikes his own voice because it's so awesome. But, well, I guess you never know.
I would think that you would have to, at some point, either ignore what you sound like if you think you sound terrible, or come to grips with it somehow, because if you're using your voice in your profession, you're selling and creating a product, you're going to have to like what you're doing, what your output is. Otherwise, it's going to cause your work to suffer. And, you know, you're getting paid to talk. You have to at least put up with it.
Yeah, I think you eventually have to at least come to a point where you're tolerant of it, because you're going to hear yourself a lot if you're narrating an audiobook, because if
lots of playbacks.
If for no other reason, even if you don't listen to yourself when the book is done, you're probably hearing yourself a lot when it's being recorded if they need to play back a line for you to hear as to how you might be able to do it differently.
Right.
Like in the studio, you're going to hear yourself, and you know, unless you've affected a completely different voice than your own natural speaking one for narration purposes, which I'm sure some people do, but it seems awful difficult to me to maintain that for several hours a day.
I don't know how you would.
You know, in a recording booth. But I would think you would have to get to a point where you can at least stand it. Otherwise, like, you're going to spend half your time cringing over just hearing yourself, and it's not going to be a very fun job at that point.
And I know a lot of voiceover artists say they do put on an affectation for their voice, and it is hard to keep that up for 5 or 6 hours in a session.
Well, I'm saying I have a specific key that I like to sing in a lot.
And what key is that?
Off. Sing in the key of off.
Oh, that's too funny.
Musically, I play the stereo. That I'm an aficionado in playing the stereo.
Yeah, I can play the radio.
There you go.
I wonder if people who speak more than one language have the same trouble listening to themselves, even in another language, or if that makes a difference in how they speak. Or
I took German, and I think it was my second year, we had to make these videos for our class. And I made one with two of my friends, and we were speaking German. The video was horrible. For some reason, I was in a lot of high school videos. All of them were bad. I don't know if it's me or... So I have this German video with two of my friends, and it gets to be the day that we have to show them in class. And I couldn't handle it. I asked my teacher if I could leave the room while our video was playing, because I just couldn't handle hearing myself in that setting. It's real. Mine is really bad. My own disbelief at the sound of my own voice.
There must be a scientific term for that. I'll have to Google it and see if there's a condition of not liking your own voice. They didn't give it a name in the article. I was kind of surprised.
I thought it was an interesting article, and it's something that when we do interviews on this show eventually, we're going to ask different narrators about, because I did pose the question on my Twitter feed, Audiobook Casey, and I did get one response from someone who says he wasn't a fan of hearing his own voice, but it was partly because of hearing his own voice, but also because it would make him question his readings of dialogue or narration of scenes in a book. So I thought that was interesting. So that's going to be something we talk to narrators about as we start to interview people. Hopefully next month we'll be having some interviews appear on your podcast feed with some different people.
Different people would be good.
Well, I think that we've complained about our own voices enough for today.
Well, if we don't do it, someone will.
For the news, Ken, I want to thank you for coming on and
my pleasure.
Going over some of these news items with me.
Back to the basics.
Biggest takeaways for me are audiobook sales are booming.
Yay.
Nobody likes the sound of their own voice.
True.
And I was wrong about Kevin Hart.
Oh, could someone write that down? Casey actually admitted that he was wrong about something.
Yeah, I want that one on the record because people usually bring up the fact that I don't admit when I'm wrong. So
seriously, somebody write this down. Well, I've been out of the basement so long today, I'm not really sure what to do with myself now or what I should do next.
What you're going to have to do now is you're going to have to tell us all about the PDQ release of the week. And after you do that, we'll come back and we'll talk about what's caught my ear this week. And then we'll do Missing in Audio later in the show, where I run down some of the books that I would like to see come out as audiobooks, most of which, ironically enough, given our discussion earlier, happen to be nonfiction. So with that, we'll throw it to you in another spot. I will disappear temporarily. I don't know if that'll make people happy or sad, but Ken is going to tell us about the PDQ release of the week, and then I'll be back with some other stuff, and the show can pick up in quality going forward.
Thanks, Casey. Hey, listeners, if you haven't yet gotten Dad something for Father's Day, here's a great idea from PDQ Audiobooks. It's the New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes 60-episode set. That's right, the world-famous sleuth is back in this astounding 60-episode collection, direct from the original audio broadcasts. Featuring Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, this collection contains nearly 30 hours of old-time radio broadcasting at its best. Digitally remastered from the original broadcast recordings, this amazing set is a true collector's item for Sherlock Holmes fans everywhere. Take a listen.
Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. Well, I'm sure Dr. Watson's ready for us. Let's go in and join him, shall we?
Come in. Good evening, Mr. Bartell.
Good evening, Doctor.
Quiet, Willie. Quiet, monsieur. Lie down.
Dogs seem very pleased with themselves tonight. Did they have a good day?
Yes, the three of us did, my boy. Go on, run off out in the patio. I took a 7-iron and some old golf balls on the beach this afternoon. I improved my game, I think, and the dogs had a great time chasing the golf balls. On the way home, the little rascals had a furious battle with an elderly pelican, so their day was complete.
I'll have to join you on one of your afternoon strolls, Doctor. You and the dog seem to have so much fun.
Oh, I'll be glad of your company, Mr. Bartell. Well, draw up your usual chair, and I'll get on with tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure.
From the hint you gave us last week, I guess a Frenchman played a prominent part in the story?
Yes, indeed he did, Mr. Bartell.Is name was Francois Lavillard, and he was a detective of some note in his own country. The time my story begins, it was in 1889, to be exact. Lavillard had come over to London to discuss with Holmes the difficulties of translating some of his monographs into the French language. At this particular time, I was in the early days of my marriage, Mr. Bartell, and this fact, combined with a busy practice, meant that I saw very little of my old friend.
He must have missed you, Doctor.
He did? Well, of course, he'd never admit the fact, but to get on with my story. One cloudless June afternoon, I found myself in the neighborhood of Baker Street, and I couldn't resist paying a visit to Holmes. Mrs. Hudson was out, but having retained my old latchkey, I let myself in and mounted the familiar stairs. It gave me a strange feeling as I raised my hand to knock on what once had been my own living room door.
Come in.
Oh, hello, Holmes.
Here, Holmes.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I didn't know you...
Watson, my dear fellow. How very nice to see you again.
It's great to see you, Holmes. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No.
I didn't know that you had company.
Not at all, my dear fellow. We're delighted, aren't we, Lavillard? Watson, this is Monsieur Lavillard.
How do you do, sir? How do you do?
Enchanté, monsieur. I have often wished to meet the so charming Dr. Watson. Holmes has told me a great deal about you.
Oh, it's very nice of you, sir.
That suits you, Watson. You look splendid, old fellow. Gained a little weight, haven't you?
Yes, a few pounds, I think.
Come, you sit down, won't you?
You sure that I'm not interrupting you in some important discussion?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, mon cher docteur. We were having a good-natured argument on the relative abilities of the French criminal compared to the English.
Oh, interesting.
You must lend me your support, Watson. Monsieur Levilla is convinced that the English criminal is a very dull dog indeed.
Well, we've met some far from dull ones in our time, I assure you, Monsieur Levilla.
Ah, the exceptions rather than the rule, I fear, mon cher docteur.
You're stubborn, aren't you, Levilla?
Believe me, my dear friend, that I will yield to no one in my admiration of your knowledge and skill. That is why I wish I could persuade you to practice in Paris. Ah, there you would find opponents really worthy of your steel. What can happen to interest you in this land of grey fogs, boiled potatoes, and pots of tea?
For myself, sir, you're not very flattering.
Oh, don't be so insular, Watson.
Oh, I meant no offense, my friend.
Well, you say that the English criminal is dull. Well, perhaps if you were to read a published story of mine called A Study in Scarlet, you'd think differently. It tells of a very exciting adventure that Holmes and I had.
I have read it, my friend.
Oh, you have?
An extremely gripping story, but surely you will admit that the crime was essentially of American origin.
He's right, Watson. He's perfectly right, dear me. What can I do to vindicate the dishonor of the London criminal? Let me see. Oh, yes, of course. A copy of today's Times. That's fine. I shall introduce you to a section known as the agony column. Where is it now? Oh, yes, here we are. This should convince you of the color and variety of English life.
The agony column?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds most painful. What is it, pray?
A personal column is liable to contain anything from a lover's frantic appeal to his lady love to a ransom note.
Challenge Dad to see if he can figure out who done it before Sherlock does. Check the show notes for the link to this title, or just go to Audible and search PDQ Audiobooks Sherlock. Your dad will be glad you did. Back to you, Casey.
And thanks once again to Ken for joining us for the news and for telling us all about this week's release from PDQ. And with that, we will be moving on to what caught my ear this week. And I have to say that this week was a little bit of a challenge to find something that would be out at about the time you would hear this episode that I would be adding to my own listening library to get to in the future, if not the immediate future, then the extended. And I say if not the immediate future because while I did find a title and while it will go into my listening library, it is doubtful that I will get to this one anytime soon because it is a book in a series that I am really just at the beginning of, and I have a lot of work to do to get through them, and I kind of like to listen to them in order if I can. I make a few exceptions, but that's generally how I like to do it. I'm happy to say that the next couple weeks are going to be a lot easier for me to do when it comes to what caught my ear, because I can already tell you there are a couple titles that caught my ear for next week and the week after that, so that'll be easy. But this one was a little bit of a challenge. I went with Tom Clancy, Point of Contact. This book is written by Mike Madden. I believe that is how you say it. It is Maden, so I suppose it could be Maiden, but I'm going to assume that it is Madden, and narrated by the incomparable Scott Brick for Penguin Random House Audio. And this is the latest book in the Jack Ryan universe, the Jack Ryan and Jack Ryan Jr. novels that were started by Tom Clancy so many years ago. And of course, after he passed away a few years ago, two authors, Mark Greaney and Grant Blackwood, sort of shepherded this universe along, and I really enjoy the work of Mark Greaney. I haven't really listened to any of Grant Blackwood's work, but I'm enjoying another series by Greaney as we speak, the Gray Man series. I'm working my way through that. And so those two gentlemen sort of continued the series after Clancy's death, but it was announced that they would be leaving the series and they would be replaced by Mark Cameron and Mike Madden going forward. and this is the first release from Mr. Madden, and it is called Point of Contact, and it is the 23rd book chronologically in the Jack Ryan universe, and is the 22nd in the publication order. So I'm not sure how that works exactly, but if you look at audible.com, if you browse for this book, you can see the order, you can see the series and click on it, and you can see the order that they are meant to go in chronologically and publication-wise. And that's kind of a cool thing. And of course, it wouldn't be a Caught My Ear segment without an excerpt. So from Scott Brick and Mike Madden and Penguin Random House Audio, I will take you now to an excerpt from this week's Caught My Ear title, Point of Contact, from the Jack Ryan universe.
Freeze or drown. He wasn't sure which one would come first. It didn't really matter. Either way, Jack Ryan Jr. knew he was going to die in the next 2 minutes. The F-470 Zodiac rubber raiding craft pounded through the chopping waves beneath a storm-shrouded moon. Jack clutched the safety ropes in both fists to keep from getting thrown overboard. So did Adara Sherman, seated in front of him. She was getting it worse than he was. Every bounce threw more spray in their faces. Jack's NVGs were spattered with ice. He couldn't risk wiping off the night vision lenses while he was riding this bucking Bronco. But a half-mile ahead, he could still barely make out the oil rig, lights off, its hulking frame a black shadow above the surging sea. That was fine by Jack. The darkness shielded their approach. Jack's teeth chattered and his mind clouded in the numbing cold. The freezing North Sea wind seemed to slice right through his 5mm wetsuit, and the stinging sleet felt like a broken beer bottle dragged across his exposed skin. Despite their misery, Bartosz Midas Jankowski gunned the engine full throttle, his goggled eyes fixed on his GPS. They were supposed to run quiet, but they got off late. At least the howling wind swept away most of the noise from the baffled 55-horsepower outboard motor and back. The high winds also meant a helicopter landing was out of the question, and fast roping out of it, Jack's favorite new skill, even more so. All three of them were getting beat to hell, and time wasn't their friend. If they didn't reach the oil platform ladder in the next 2 minutes, they would fail the mission. Assuming we survive for the next 2 minutes, Jack reminded himself. And then there were the gunmen on the oil rig to deal with. But right now, armed killers seemed like the least of their problems. As if on cue, a rogue wave swelled beneath the speeding craft, lifting the port side out of the water. Jack had shoved the toes of his boots through the safety rope along the rubber deck for purchase, but felt himself pitching over the side anyway. Midas grabbed the drag handle of Jack's vest with a sure hand at the last second, saving him from a headlong dive into the angry Black Sea. Jack glanced to his right at the other Zodiac just a few yards away. In the green haze of his iced NVGs, Jack saw Dom Caruso flash him a quick "okay" with his gloved thumb. Jack thumbed him back. No time for chit-chat. Ding Chavez drove Dom's boat, his eyes fixed on the GPS locator. The 5 special operators of the campus were a close-knit team, the tip of the spear of the private off-the-books intelligence agency known only to President Ryan and a select few of his closest advisors. They were a small organization, but they punched hard and far above their weight. This mission was proof of that. They did the jobs the CIA or other government intelligence services couldn't do, or wouldn't. Tonight was no exception. Jack ran through the schematics of the oil rig platform in his mind again, particularly the control room and machine shop, his 2 targets. Gavin Beery's webmaster magic had come through again. If it weren't for him, they'd be going in totally blind. Gavin's intel brief confirmed 4 hostages and 6 Green Army faction eco-terrorists, armed and trained. But intel on a hostage rescue operation like this was always sketchy. John Clark's warning echoed in his head. Stay frosty out there. You don't know what you don't know. True that. It's time, Ding whispered in everyone's comms. Roger that, Midas confirmed. Jack watched Ding's boat veer off at a sharp angle, its bulletproof armor-flate rubber skin shredding water into the turn. The small drilling platform had 2 access ladders. Jack's boat would take the front. Ding and Dom would scramble up the back. On training runs with the Norwegian MJK, Marinea coming down this past week, the weather had been cold but calm, and they'd been able to get the timing down perfectly. But out here, tonight, on a raging North Sea, everything was up for grabs. The mission had 2 goals: save the hostages and kill or capture the tangos. The Green Army faction threatened not only to kill the captured oil workers, but also to blow the rig, causing another catastrophic oil spill disaster like Deepwater Horizon if their ransom demands weren't met. American policy had always been to ignore ransom demands from terrorists. Meeting them inevitably led to more terror. Any student of history knew that. But some governments and corporations apparently didn't read history. Those were the people Green Army faction targeted, profitably. But in this case, intel from an informant indicated that the group on the rig had no intention of surrendering after the money transfer. In their sick minds, they planned on saving the earth by poisoning the sea in order to fuel more public outrage at the oil industry. Killing the oil rig workers was a sacred bonus, like ISIS butchering captive infidels. The decommissioned oil rig stood in an abandoned field dead center in the North Sea and in international waters. The Texas wildcatting team was developing new fracking-style technology to revive dead underwater wells. The GAF got wind of it and struck.
And there you have it. Tom Clancy's Point of Contact is what caught my ear this week. And if you listen to that title or any of the titles that I mentioned as having caught my ear, I'd love to know what you thought of them. You can email us at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com and tell us all about it. Tell us what you think of my book selections. Like I said before, and we'll say again to avoid any confusion, these are not endorsements as I have not read the books yet. They're just my way of pointing out something that I intend to listen to at some point in the near or, in this case, distant future. And with that, we're going to move on to the fan feedback question for this week. And again, feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com is where you need to send your emails if you want to answer these questions that I've asked these first few weeks of hosting the show, to get a dialogue going and let me know what you think. This question I sort of teased in the news segment that you heard earlier with myself and Ken, and I'm going to flesh it out now. It's called Missing in Audio, and it's my list of books that I would like to see make it to audio that haven't yet been released in this format. As we said earlier, the sales for 2016 were up again, and that continues a trend, and more publishers are looking to publish more and more titles, and in order for them to do that, they sort of have to look into their back catalog or get their acquisition teams busy and see what they can get the rights to that hasn't been released. And so that's good news if you have titles that you would like to hear on audio that haven't quite made it there yet. I have a few, and I'm going to discuss them here in a minute. A couple of other things that sort of prompted me to broach this topic was I couldn't help but notice back on May 30th that 3 books by Carl Sagan were released to Audible from Brilliance Audio, and looking again, it looks like they have another 8 scheduled for the 25th of July. And so I guess they're going to have Carl Sagan Day at Audible on the 25th. But So they are releasing like 11 Carl Sagan titles in just a couple months, and I didn't look at them all, but it looks like the ones that I did look at were all produced in 2017. The audio versions, of course. The written works were produced long ago, but the audio looks like for a majority of these, and certainly all the ones that I looked at, is being produced this year. And last year I saw a similar thing with the author George Plimpton, who is sort of known for his participatory is not a word that I know of, participatory sports journalism books like Paper Lion. Paper Lion is probably his most famous work in the participatory sports journalism field. And a bunch of his books were dropped on Audible last year by Hachette. They were released on April 26th of 2016, and then there was one that was released on May 4th of last year. And so that's another case where you had an author's catalog that hadn't made it to audio yet that they were able to produce and get out there as audiobooks. And I'm very happy about that. Paper Lion was one that I had heard of growing up, and being a sports fan is something that I would probably enjoy. And so that coming out on audio did make me happy. And another title that was released last year that was on my wish list is for coming out on audio was The Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam, and that came out in March of last year. And I was so happy when that came out, because when I first started to read sports columns on the internet and things like that, and books would come up, The Breaks of the Game was one that came up a lot. If you read Bill Simmons, he's a fan of the book, and in fact, there's an introduction to this book that was taken from a column that he wrote for ESPN back in the day. And so when Breaks of the Game came out, I was very happy that I was finally going to be able to listen to it on audio. It came out in March, and life sort of got in the way, and actually I listened to it for a while and then stopped because my heart wasn't in it. It wasn't anything wrong with the book or anything. I just was so distracted by things happening in my personal life at the time that I just put it aside. Well, recently, as in the day I'm recording this, I have started it again from the beginning, and I'm going to finish it this time, hopefully. Hopefully no major distractions come up like last time, especially since one of those distractions was my father passing away, so don't need any type of distraction like that as I listen to it this time. And so far I'm about 5 hours in, I would say, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So I think that I will be able to finish it probably by the time you heard this. You'll hear more about that in the audio bingo section of this podcast. So when I talk about books that aren't available as audiobooks yet, I need to clarify something. There's actually two ways I have broken this category down. But when I say not available as an audiobook, I mean on the commercial market. And I have to make that distinction because some of the listeners of this podcast, like myself, are visually impaired, and we have access to the Braille and Audio Reading, Download, or BARD service from the Library of Congress that is accessible for people with visual impairment and other physical disabilities that make reading difficult. And so they have titles that have never been commercially released as audiobooks that you can download from their website if you qualify for access. And so I can tell that I might mention a few books that aren't available commercially but are available on Bard. And so I could see some of my friends with Bard Access who listen to this show saying, well, that book's on Bard, you could just listen to it there. And I know that, but the vast majority of the people who are hearing this are only going to get it in the commercial market. And so if it's not released in the commercial market, it may as well not have been released at all. And so that's sort of the first thing that I need to clarify. And another thing is, some of the books that I might mention have been released as abridged versions only. And of course, I think I speak for most listeners when I say that we want the whole thing, we want the unabridged version. And so even though an abridgment is available, there's always an opportunity to go back and to release unabridged versions. And my list of books that I would love to see on audiobook that haven't made it there yet is mostly going to be nonfiction, because I have a larger frame of reference with that than I do with fiction. And so I know what's missing that is of interest to me, and it tends to be more nonfiction titles. A lot of them fall under the category of biographies of professional wrestlers. Now, there are some available. Brock Lesnar and Shawn Michaels have biographies, as does Bob Hardcore Holly, and AJ Lee, otherwise known as AJ Mendes Brooks. Hers just came out in April, Crazy is My Superpower. There are some that were released as abridgments. Stone Cold Steve Austin's The Stone Cold Truth was released as an abridgment, as was one of Hulk Hogan's biographies, autobiographies, if you will. But there are still a lot that haven't made it. Mick Foley has written several. Have a Nice Day was sort of his first, and he did read an abridged version of that. I actually have the CDs somewhere. I was on 3 CDs, and it was enjoyable, and I think it would be really good if he read them all. That was one that I got in college through a friend of mine was subscribed to a book club, and she mentioned that one to me because she knew that I was a wrestling fan. So I would love to see Mick Foley, his catalog, get unabridged recordings. Chris Jericho's first couple books, his most recent one, The Best in the World at What I Have No Idea, is available as an unabridged audiobook from Tantor. It's not read by him, but it is out there, and that's cool. So I would like to see, because I'm a wrestling fan, I'd like to see more of the professional wrestling autobiographies and some of the other books covering the history of pro wrestling come out. I highly recommend the Death of WCW audiobook that came out last year. That one was also on my want list for quite a while, as coming out as an audiobook. Bret Hart is another one. Hitman, My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling. That's one that's very, very good. I've read the book before. It would just be nice to have it available as an audiobook. His former sister-in-law, Martha Hart, she wrote an autobiography and chronicled the death of her husband, Owen Hart, on live WWF pay-per-view back in 1999. That book is heartbreaking. I heard excerpts of it read on a podcast about a year ago, and it was just devastating. That one would be another interesting one to have as an audio book. Outside of pro wrestling, one title that I would love to see come out commercially is one that is available for Bard users. It's called For God, Country, and Coca-Cola by Mark Pendergrast. It is a history of the Coca-Cola company from the founding sort of through the early 1990s. There may even be a more recent edition that has more details than that. beyond the 90s, but it's a pretty epic book. It chronicles, like I said, everything from the invention of the drink all the way up through the ad campaigns of the 80s, the new Coke controversy, and so on and so forth. Sort of a definitive history of Coca-Cola, really. And that one would be so much fun to see come out as a commercial audiobook. I'm a big fan of Coke. You can probably tell that a lot of these books that I'm mentioning are related to things that I'm a fan of, and that's for obvious reasons. I'm a big Coke drinker, so that one's one that has gotten my attention previously, and I've listened to it through Bard. It'd just be nice to have a commercial release available, I think. Another one that has come out as a abridged version is Live from New York, which is the oral history of Saturday Night Live. That was written by James Andrew Miller and Tom Shales, and James Andrew Miller has sort of made a cottage industry for himself out of doing these oral histories of pop culture icons. They did Saturday Night Live, and he's also done ESPN, and the Creative Artists Agency is the most recent of his oral history books, and the ESPN and CAA books are both out on unabridged audio. And as I said, the Live from New York, which was the first of these types of books that he did, is available in an abridged version. But there was a new edition of the book that came out just a few years ago. It was released with more content. The original book stopped somewhere in the 2000 range, and this one picks up where that one left off and brings you into closer into the current era. And so it would be nice to have that come out as an unabridged audiobook. And I believe I have a supporter in this quest in the author, James Andrew Miller. I mentioned this on Twitter back when the new edition came out. I said, it'd be nice to get an unabridged audiobook of this one. And he liked and maybe retweeted my tweet. So hopefully some company out there would be able to acquire the rights if they have lapsed and produce that as an unabridged audio book. Another title also related to television, sort of a famous book that came out in the 90s, was made into a movie by HBO. Bill Carter's The Late Shift, Letterman, Leno, and the Network Battle for the Night. This one covers the tumult and the controversy surrounding the succession plan for the Tonight Show, the Johnny Carson to Jay Leno plan that ultimately led to David Letterman moving to CBS. And of course, like I said, this was turned into a movie by HBO. It would be really nice to get that as a commercial audiobook as well. Bill Carter wrote another book, The War for Late Night, which chronicled the disastrous tenure of Conan O'Brien as Tonight Show host and all the craziness that led from Leno giving up the show to Conan taking the show to Leno getting it back and Conan moving to TBS. And I say disastrous because it just was a nightmare for all involved, really. Nobody really came out of it looking all that great, with the exception of Conan. I think he came out of it looking better than anybody else, but he took a battering and a bruising, and it was a very difficult ordeal for him, and that's chronicled in The War for Late Night, which is available as an audiobook. It's one of my very favorites. Actually, I try to listen to it once every other year or so, and I'm about due for another listen this year. So Bill Carter's The Late Shift is sort of the first type of book chronicling a Tonight Show transition that had some pretty major consequences. And so The War for Light Night is sort of an indirect sequel, and it's one that I enjoy. So I'd love to get the Late Shift as an audio book. And in the realm of fiction, of course, if you listened to this show and heard my book commentary on Thrawn by Timothy Zahn, you know I'm a big Star Wars fan. And of course, there are plenty of Star Wars books that have been released on audio, but some of them have only been released as abridged versions, and it would be nice to get unabridged versions of them. I'm thinking of the New Jedi Order series and the Legacy series that came after that, and it would be nice to get those in unabridged audio. And there are some standalone titles that never received unabridged treatment, and you can bet that I would definitely buy any of those that were released. Now, this is sort of problematic because I can kind of see why Disney wouldn't want to do this. I can see why they wouldn't want to release these as unabridged audiobooks at the same time they're producing material in the new canon. They wouldn't necessarily want to confuse people in the marketplace, although I would argue that audiobook listeners to Star Wars material are going to be savvy enough to be able to tell the difference. But that's just me, so I would like to see some of those released as unabridged audiobooks as well. The novelizations for the original trilogy are not available commercially on audio, and I wish they were. Now, this is another tricky one because there is at least some debate in the fan community. There's some people that would like to see the original trilogy get renovelized because of things that were put into the original novels that have been subsumed by later films produced, but ones that come earlier in the timeline. And one of the most famous ones is in Return of the Jedi, where Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Luke that Owen is his brother, and of course that is now canonically not true. So there's some argument that because of things like that, and there are other things as well, it would be nice to have the original trilogy renovelized. And if that ever happens, then they can release them as audiobooks. And I know there are young adult versions of them that came out a few years ago around the time that all the Force Awakens movie material was being released. They released some young adult things that were sort of like novelizations of the films, but I'm talking about adult novels, and it would be nice to either get the original versions or have them rewritten and get new audiobooks of those, or both. You know, you could do it either way. I would buy multiple versions of them, I'm sure. But that is sort of my list, my desires for what books I would like to see come out on audiobook that haven't yet. I would love to hear yours. You know the email address, feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. Let me know the titles that you are just waiting for, chomping at the bit to get on audio, and maybe why, and maybe give me your dream narrator for these titles if you have someone in mind that you'd love to hear narrate these particular books. That is perfectly fine. Answering that question will also get you into the contest that we've plugged several times on the show for up to 6 free books from audible.com. So it would definitely be worth your time. I'd be very interested to hear what you would be eager to purchase should it ever come to audiobook. And like I said, the fact is that these publishers are looking for more and more titles because sales just keep going up, and that can't last forever. But You can take advantage of it while it's happening, and that's the best time to get your titles out, especially if it's costing less and less to produce them and it's easier to make an audiobook profitable. Why not revisit some of the old catalogs? So that is my question for the week. What would you like to see released on audio that hasn't yet been? And with that, we are going to hear next a bit on how to play audio bingo. This month is audiobook month, and we have audio bingo going on social media. I am playing. I will give you an update on my progress after you hear all about how you can play. The month is, of course, half over, as I've said 30 times already on this show, and we'll probably say again another 5. You can still make some progress and get in on the action, and Ken's going to tell you all about how to play audio bingo, and then I will be back with my audio bingo update, and we will close the show. So here's Ken with audio bingo.
Hey audio fans, this is producer Ken, inviting you to join Jess and Tina's super fun audiobook challenge. Jess from theaudiobookworm.com and Tina from astoldbytina.net have put their heads together and come up with a unique way to celebrate the fact that June is audiobook month. The object is to get 3 in a row or fill out all 9 squares on your audio bingo card. A printable version of the card can be found at theaudiobookworm.com. The 9 spaces to fill in are as follows. 1. Listen to an audiobook narrated by the author. 2. Listen to an audiobook recommended by a friend. 3. Listen to an audiobook that has been on your TBR or to be read list. I guess this should be TBL for to be listened list. Anyway, listen to an audiobook that's been on your list for more than a year. Number 4. Listen to an audiobook that was released within the last month. Number 5. Free space. Number 6. Listen to an audiobook that was released during your birth month. Number 7. Listen to an audiobook with a narrator that has the same first initial as you. Number 8. Listen to an audiobook narrated by a famous actor. Number 9. Re-listen to your favorite audiobook. The officially recognized hashtag for this event is #AudioBingo. This is a challenge after all, so why not spark a competition among your friends and family? It's a great way to get them to listen to audiobooks, maybe even for the first time. It's also a good opportunity to get to know your fellow listeners via social media. The Talking Audiobooks podcast's very own Casey Trowbridge is participating, and he'll be discussing his progress in future episodes. The challenge is going to be active for the entire month of June, so start listening and have fun.
And now that you know how to play audio bingo, let me give you my audio bingo update for the week. As I record this, I have finished 5 selections, filled 5 spaces on my audio bingo card, if you will. That means I have 4 left to fill all 9. As you hear this, hopefully I will have finished book 6, which is what I'm working on right now. It is The Breaks of the Game, as I mentioned earlier, by David Halberstam. This one has been on my to-be-read list for more than a year, so hopefully by the time you hear this, I will have checked off that spot. And then we'll be down to 3, and they'll be the 3 that I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet. One of them I think I know what I'm going to do, but I have to wait till the end of the month because the book isn't released yet. But the other 2 were sort of up for grabs. But this will give me 6th if I can finish Breaks of the Game by the time you listen to this. And if I can't, that means something disastrous has happened because I'm very excited to be reading this book. Hopefully all the way through this time. As I said before, I started it last year and stopped midway for whatever reason. I don't even remember. But it was at a time when a lot was just happening for me personally. So hopefully I can rededicate myself to it, and we'll add that to the completed list when you listen to this podcast next week. The other books I have finished and the other squares I've filled in are listen to a book narrated by a famous actor. That was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, narrated by Nick Offerman from Audible Studios. I have listened to a book narrated by a narrator who has the same first initial as me. That would be Chuck Klosterman 10, the audio companion. I have listened to a book released in the past month. That was last week's Caught My Ear title, Vacation Guide to the Solar System by Olivia Koski and Jana Gersevich from Penguin Audio, as was Chuck Klosterman 10, also from Penguin Audio. And I have to say, my expectations for Vacation Guide to the Solar System were met. I enjoyed the book. It was a light read. It didn't take very long. I even managed to learn a few things and enjoyed it quite thoroughly. I filled my free space by listening to our Talking Audiobooks monthly book club selection, The Yucks by Jason Vuick, narrated by Patrick Lawler from Tantor Audio. And I did that in pretty much one day, so I'm preparing the questions for our round table discussion, which will be held either later this month or very early in July, and we'll get that out to you, and I hope you enjoy that. That'll be me interacting with some of my friends and hopefully putting together a good episode. So that is another bingo space that I filled. And the last one that I have filled to this point is Hacker, Hoaxer, Whistleblower, Spy, The Many Faces of Anonymous. That is by Gabriella Coleman, excuse me. I was thinking of somebody else. This is Gabriella Coleman, and it's narrated by the 2017 Audie Award winner for Female Narrator of the Year, Tavia Gilbert. This one is from Tantor Audio. This was released in my birth month. It came out on January 31st, 2017, and it was an interesting book. I enjoy reading about hackers and hacker culture and that sort of use of technology. And this was a really good book. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's not the best book I've read on Anonymous. That would be Parmy Olson's We Are Anonymous. I think that one is slightly better because that one takes more of a detached view of the subject, whereas Coleman, as an anthropologist, sort of embedded herself into Anonymous for a while, and it was a different perspective, and they were both enjoyable books. But if I had to pick one, I would still go with the We Are Anonymous by Parmy Olson, but really, this was an enjoyable experience. It was 13 hours and 40 minutes long, so it took me a few days to really get through it all, but that is my audiobook released in my birth month, as I was born in January of 1981, and this is January of 2017 when this book came out. So I was happy to check that one off of the list. I was running through my spreadsheet looking at release dates of audiobooks that I own to see which one would fit the bill, and I came to this one, and it had been on my to-be-read list for a little while, of course, coming out in January. I don't think I noticed it right then, but, once I found out about it, it got added to the list, and so that is Bingo Space number 5. And with all of that having been said, I want to remind you again of our fan feedback question of the week. Feedback at talkingaudiobooks.com is where you can send your answers. I want to know what your missing in audio titles are, the books that you're hoping get an audiobook release one of these days. And of course, if you answer that question or our past questions, you'll be entered into our giveaway to win up to 6 free Audible credits that you can use on absolutely any book that you would like to on the Audible website. And that is available to anyone who sends us an email at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com between now and June 30th. And we will have more details on that once things have been wrapped up. The other thing that I sort of want to mention is I think I know the subject of next week's topic, which is going to be, we're going to talk about the audiobook White Whales, or the audiobook Mount Everest, the books that I have tried multiple times to get through and have failed for whatever reason each time. They're books that I want to read and that I haven't necessarily given up on, but I just can't seem to get over the hump, can't tame them, can't seem to ever get to the end. We're going to talk about that next week, and you'll be able to tell me all about yours as well at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. Follow me on social media, particularly Twitter, twitter.com/audiobookcasey. That's important. That's where I share a lot of news items and sale alerts, things that don't necessarily make the show because they only last for like a couple days. Like Graphic Audio had a sale last weekend on Marvel titles. You could get them for 15% off by using a code, and I couldn't really record a commercial for that because it was like a 3-day sale, Friday to Sunday. So I just tweeted it out and told you where to go to browse their catalog of Marvel titles and add them to your cart and use the code to get the discount. So there are certain things that it would behoove you as a listener to the show to follow me on Twitter @audiobookcasey to sort of get the full scoop of news and information that we send out during the week and that might not make it into an episode. More timely stuff. And we'll even tweet out some stuff that we will talk about on the show. You can also find me on Goodreads @audiobookcasey, and again, that's all one word, audiobookcasey, Casey is how you spell the name. And you can follow my reading progress there. You can see what's on my to-be-read shelf. I'll have to add a lot more to that because I just updated my Audible wish list yesterday. And my wish list currently stands at 540 titles, give or take a few. And so I will need to add some to my want to read list. But that's a good place to check out my status, what I'm currently reading, what I want to read, what I have read, how I feel about it. I'm mentioning my audio bingo titles there because I'm working hard to fill that card. And I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I hope you're enjoying all of them. Let me know how you feel about the podcast. Feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. Again, you'll get entered into the giveaway. Let us know what you think of the show, things you like, things you don't like, things you'd like to see us talk about, topic suggestions, interview suggestions. We're always open to whatever the audience has for us. And so to wrap this up, I am your host, Casey Trowbridge, and this has been Season 2, Episode 4 of the Talking Audiobooks podcast. Until next week, keep listening.
Talking Audiobooks is a trademark of Kenjoy Media, produced by Kenjoy Media, copyright 2017, all rights reserved. Your host has been Casey Trowbridge, produced by Kenjoy, theme music composed by Christian Anderson, licensed through epidemicmusic.com. Visit our website at talkingaudiobooks.com, follow us on Twitter @TalkingAudio, follow us on Facebook @Talking Audiobooks, and subscribe to the Talking Audiobooks YouTube channel. Here's a disclaimer. Various sponsors like Audible.com help make this podcast possible. However, they are not responsible for its content. They don't dictate what we talk about or what books we share with you, and therefore the opinions that you hear on here are unfortunately those of the host and our guests. We'd love to hear from you, so email us at feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. Tell us what audiobooks you're listening to, what you've liked in the past, narrators that you like. Ask us questions, anything. It's for your feedback. Feedback@talkingaudiobooks.com. That's it. See you next time on Talking Audiobooks.